Welcome to the Ultimate Sports Podcast. The third guest of the evening covers the New York Knicks for New York Sports Today to talk about the draft, the offseason, the Knicks, and more. Jonathan Wagner, how are you doing tonight?
Great, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem. I'm doing fine. The biggest thing that happened this week, other than the Raptors winning the championship, over the last week, was Anthony Davis getting traded to the Los Angeles Lakers. The Pelicans get a monster haul back. Do you think the Lakers gave up too much? Because I do.
They did give up a lot, but, you have to consider the situation they're in. So, obviously, when LeBron signed there, it wasn't to build slowly with young kids. We know that. So, it was to lure that second big star, maybe a third big star if they could get it. And, you got to give up something to get something. And if you were going to pair LeBron with that other big star, and there's no other bigger star as a free agent or in a trade, I should say, that they could have got at this point right now than Anthony Davis, and it's a guy that LeBron's wanted to play with for a while. I think it's something they had to do. Like I said, you got to give up something to get something, and if they didn't give up as much as they did, they probably wouldn't have gotten done.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Although it was a move, in my opinion, that the Lakers had to make. They were under immense pressure in the offseason. I thought they were the team that was facing the most pressure going into the offseason to try to find a second star to go with LeBron James. And let's go to the flip side of this deal, the Pelicans. This gives them a ton of assets to build around Zion with. Do you think the Pelicans could surprise some folks next year and perhaps make the postseason?
It's possible. It all depends on chemistry and fit and everything. But like you said, they got a good haul. The big thing with them too is even if that doesn't happen next year for them, and obviously it's making the postseason versus being a contender, two different things. So they're kind of looking at this both ways. Like, yeah, maybe they can take that step and make the postseason next year with the haul they got back. But it's more about the future too for them because they control the Lakers draft picks now going forward for a while, and that plus what they got back and bringing these kids along slowly. All those assets combined are the right way to build. So if you're going to lose a guy like Anthony Davis, that's what you have to do. Is you have to not only look for the short-term future, you have to build toward the longer-term future. And I think they've done that. Not only with the pieces they got back in terms of personnel that they can put on their roster next year, but also in terms of those picks that they're going to control, the Lakers picks that they're going to now control.
Yeah, and I really like the trade for both sides. I think that Lonzo and Ingram had to be in it. Lakers were fortunate that they got to keep the guy they love in Kuzma. Let's talk about the draft. There's a lot of smoke going around about the Pelicans possibly shopping that number 4 pick. I think it's absolutely in play. I heard a rumor today that they could move up to 2 and pick R.J. Barrett to pair with Zion. What do you make of that rumor?
I haven't heard that one yet. There's so much going on right now. I just, Chris Paul now not happy in Houston. So the NBA is obviously the best soap opera around because there's just continued stories that just keep swirling around. And that's the latest one right now. But, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they'll do that. Even if they do, to me, John Morant is a better player than Barrett. It's not someone they may need right now. But, if that's something that's in play for them and that's something they want to do, they might explore that. But right now, I think, Memphis, it's really up to them, too. I think they like Morant and they want to keep him and they want to draft him at number 2. So I'm not sure that there's anything that New Orleans is going to be able to offer them to maybe sway them from that thinking, but you never know. Like I said, the NBA is crazy with everything that goes on, not only, on the floor, but as well as off the floor, as we know. So we'll have to see how that plays out, but that's an interesting one.
Yeah, that is an interesting one. Another smoke screen that came out today. Well, I know the reports are that the Knicks are going to work out Darius Garland, but the smoke part to this is that they're considering him 3rd overall. To me, it's just due diligence, right?
Yeah, that's all it seems to be. And it's smart on their part. You have to look at everybody. I think ultimately, push comes to shove, they're hoping Morant falls to them. If he doesn't, I think they're going to go with Barrett. Personally, I'm not so sure. I have some reservations about Barrett where I think I might consider Culver, but I'm not sold on that either. Only because Culver is a two-way player, and it's been a while since the Knicks have had a two-way player that's stuck around in New York for a while. We had one with KP recently, but we know how that worked out. And other than that, they're pretty rare in New York. So that's one reason I would consider Culver. But I mean, I think they're targeting Barrett right now, which probably wouldn't be the worst thing. And in terms of Garland, yeah, it's just due diligence. I think that's all it is at this point. But you never know. I mean, from everything you hear from Perry and Milzo, I think Barrett is the guy at number 3 if Morant's not there, and I don't think it's. I think Garland's a consideration, but I don't think it's a serious consideration.
I agree with you. I think R.J. Barrett will be the pick, barring the Pelicans or, the Grizzlies taking him at 2. I said the Pelicans because of that rumor I heard before. The Atlanta Hawks offered the Knicks 8 and 10 to try to move up to 3. The Knicks, in my opinion, rightfully denied. I don't think that's enough for the number 3 pick. Do you think the Hawks can move up to 4 and take whomever they would like?
I don't think they can. I mean, it's possible. I mean, it's certainly a better chance of that than trying to sway the Knicks to make that deal. The Knicks obviously said no and rightfully said no. Look, we never know how these drafts work. I mean, obviously, Giannis and Kawhi were taken at 15, so a lot of GMs are brilliant or not so smart in hindsight, and we just never know how things are going to work out. We could look back, a few years from now and say, wow, 8 and 10 really worked out a lot better than number 3. But at this point, I don't think so. And from how this draft is, because it's once you get past the top of the draft, there's enough of a drop off. It would seem, at least, although like I said, we never know how the future is going to go, but it would seem that way. So if that's the case, then the Knicks rightfully said no, and I think New Orleans would probably, because of the same reason, say no too. But at least there's a better chance of that for Atlanta. If they are looking to move up, there's a better chance of that than trying to get the Knicks to do that deal. But part of that is, from Atlanta's point of view, the player they may want. If they're looking at a guy like Barrett, that's the guy they want, and they're willing to give up 8 and 10. The guy that they want may not be there at number 4, so they may not even consider that themselves, rather than have it be on the point where whether New Orleans wants to do it. It may just be that Atlanta just doesn't want to do it, because if they can't get to 3, then they're not giving up that 8 and 10.
Yeah, that's going to be very interesting to see, because I feel like I've heard that Hawks move-up rumor a lot over the past couple of weeks. Do you have a sleeper player for the draft?
I think if you want to look down a little bit further down the list, I mean, I don't want to call a player who's slated to go much higher a sleeper, although I do think maybe a guy like DeAndre Hunter, he's like a Culver, where he's a two-way player. He did shoot the ball pretty well. If he ends up in a place like Cleveland with their new coach, with Bayline, I think that could be a place where he could kind of excel, especially defensively, and I think he'll continue to work on his game offensively. But I don't want to call somebody like him a sleeper, because he is slated to go top 5 or 6. But if you look down further, a guy like maybe P.J. Washington, didn't play much because of injury, but the talent was there at Kentucky. Rui Hachimura as well, playing obviously in a good program at Gonzaga. Another possibility of a guy that might surprise, and maybe his teammate at Gonzaga, Brandon Clark, might surprise. So maybe if you're looking down the list a little bit, because obviously you can't call a sleeper, a top 4 or 5 or 6 really, but I think those guys that are maybe slated to go a little bit lower, especially in Hachimura's case, that's a guy that originally in most mock drafts was slated to go higher, maybe top 10, maybe even 6 or 7, something like that. And his stock has fallen, so it doesn't indicate that he would be a sleeper. But if that same talent that made people say he might be a 6 or 7 or 8 is still there in him, and I believe it could be, then if he does fall, to sort of more toward the middle of the first round, like most people are expecting now, then that could be a guy that could maybe exceed expectations.
Yeah, I really am a fan of Rui Hachimura. Another guy I think could be a sleeper is Kobe White. I really like Kobe White a lot. I think there's a chance he can go 6 to the Suns. I will be surprised if he falls below 10. What do you make about Kobe White?
Yeah, I mean, I like him. He's got good speed. He's not quite Darren Fox fast, but when he gets in that open floor, he pushes the tempo. It suits the NBA game well, and he's got good vision, good passer, and can score as well. So I think he's a guy that could definitely be a guy that when he gets to that next level, you see that a lot in guys where they're kind of restrained a little bit in college because of the minutes they play and the system that they're in, and it's more of a kind of a coach's brand of basketball sometimes at the college level, and then it's more of a player's type of brand of basketball in the NBA. You start to see those types of guys, that raw talent that they had that they didn't kind of fully show in college. They show it to a degree. Obviously, that's why he's it's not like he's not thought of as being a good prospect. He obviously is, but a guy like him that maybe you don't expect to be a star, he kind of will show those talents more at the NBA level. You see that a lot in some guys. I mentioned before, guys like Giannis and Kawhi. I'm not saying that type of talent for his position, but something like that along those lines where kind of overlooked a little bit, fell in the draft a little bit, but then when they get to that next level, the NBA style of play kind of opens up a bunch of things that will suit his style of play. So that could be a guy to keep an eye on.
Yeah. There's always surprise trades that happen around this time of the year. Obviously, we just saw Anthony Davis get moved. Do you think there's going to be a surprise player traded? I know Anthony Davis obviously wasn't a surprise, but do you see any surprise players getting moved?
I'm not really sure. I haven't really thought about that too much, but I think, like you touched on, more in terms of trading up or trading down, if a team like Atlanta could do it. I mean, we've seen the big one already with Anthony Davis. I mean, that kind of had to be the first one to start the dominoes falling. I'm not sure in terms of big trades. You might see some lesser ones, some smaller trades that might be things that people wouldn't really see make a big impact. But when you fill out a roster on a team that's already a playoff team, that might make an impact.
Yeah. Should be interesting. Bradley Beal's a name that Ryan Berger mentioned. I did a podcast with him earlier. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Adrian Wojnarowski's thrown out that name of late in terms of a trade. So if I had to pick a player to be traded, not necessarily a surprise, I'd say Bradley Beal. But Ryan Berger threw an interesting duet of names at me. San Antonio's DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge. He seems to think that one of them could be on the move. What do you make of those guys in San Antonio?
That's pretty interesting. I mean, DeRozan's got to be looking at he's got to feel some regret. Looking at what happened. Obviously, he's a guy that wanted to stay in Toronto, was forced to go to San Antonio, and how could you play in Toronto with the possibility of it even. When they made the trade at the time, and of course the way it's worked out since winning the title with Kawhi, it's obviously better than they could have ever possibly even hoped. To do that right away off the bat with him. So he's a guy that I think you look at. He's looking at what happened with the Raptors, and he probably has got to be looking at that thinking, well, man, I wish that was me. Lowry and I were kind of the 1-2 punch there in Toronto, and we wanted to win that title. We never did. And then, he made the most of it. He played pretty well in San Antonio, to his credit. But when he left, he was very upset, and it didn't work out. They ended up a 7 seed, although they did fairly well in the playoffs. They pushed the Nuggets, and but obviously this is not what he wants. I mean, he wants to be a legitimate contender again, so he might be looking to try and say, hey, can you get me out of here? You never know. I don't think he's that type of guy, like some other guys that we've seen, like a guy like AD that kind of forced his way out. But, we'll see. That could be a guy that might be someone that would say, well, I'd like to see if I can, be on a contender rather than stick here in San Antonio. I know another one where Jason Tatum, another name, has been thrown out too. I don't see the Celtics doing that, but people have talked about it. I think the first thing that has to happen there is what's going to happen with Kyrie in free agency before they're going to look to trade anybody though.
Yeah, the Celtics we'll get to in a couple of minutes. We'll talk about the offseason now. Kevin Durant obviously tore his Achilles in Game 5 of the Finals. To me, he's still the biggest fish in terms of free agents. Do you think he will be a Knick, or do you think he opts in or goes elsewhere?
Tough call. I mean, it's really trying to get inside his head. I mean, to me, I know Knicks fans don't really want to hear this, but I don't believe when push comes to shove that he was going to come here anyway, even healthy. Because when it comes down to it, I believe the guy wants to win. I know a lot of people say, well, it's about his legacy, and he wants to lift the team up. And especially, there's no place winning, to win like there is in New York, and all that's true. But I think he wants to win. I mean, that's the reason he left OKC in the first place. I mean, he was right there. They were up 3-1. He could have come back the next year and tried again to beat Golden State, but he felt he had to join him instead because he wanted rings. And I don't think 2 rings is what he was shooting for. And that's all he's got right now. And now you throw in the injury. He could obviously just stay where he is, rehab for $31.5 million, and then do this again down the road. Or Golden State could offer him a max. I don't know if they'll do that at this point. I think maybe they want to see how healthy he is. But I think the injury and not winning a third title makes it even less likely than I thought already that he was going to come to New York. But again, like I said, we never know. The NBA is crazy sometimes, so it's hard to predict. But in my mind, I mean, when you look at what the Knicks have, they got a lot of young players, unproven players, potential, yes, but a lot of unproven players. And unless he's assured of getting that other star that could come there, and even with one other star, it's just him and one other star, maybe if it is a Kyrie or somebody like that, and a bunch of young kids that are still unproven, undeveloped. And then even though he has to wait that 1 year next year, after that year when he's healthy again, even if he's a dominant player again, I'm not sure he's willing to wait for the Knicks. They'd be obviously willing to wait for him, but I don't know that he's willing to wait for a team like that. I think he wants to go to somebody that's established already, or better yet, just stay where he is. I mean, obviously, Clay, his situation in Golden State as a free agent is going to factor in. But you still have Steph, you still have Green, and if he's healthy after this year and he's back to being what he was again, and he's trying to win titles again, I mean, to me, I don't see why he wouldn't stay there if that's really what this is about for him, and not about trying to win in a place like New York or some of the other things. If it comes down to that, then yeah, that changes everything. But if it's about winning, and I still believe ultimately it is about winning for him more than anything else, then I think it makes the most sense for him to stay and ride this out with the injury there, rehab, and then take a shot again after that.
Yeah, it should be very interesting. I don't think it's a lock he comes here either, although Ryan Berger thinks it's a lock, as well as a bunch of other guests I've had on the podcast. What do you think the future holds for Kawhi Leonard? He just won the Finals MVP. I think there's a better chance he re-signs in Toronto than given credit for, although I do know the Clippers are certainly in play for him. What do you think's next for Kawhi?
Yeah, I mean, that's the talk. It's between those two. There aren't really any other teams in play for him. I mean, I don't know. I think it depends. I think for him it's about winning too. And if the Clippers can show that they can paint a picture where they can make him a winner in LA. Obviously, he's from there. Did grow up a Laker fan, although some people thought he was, but he didn't. And he might want to say, well, maybe my next challenge could be to try and take down not only Golden State, but maybe AD and LeBron and the Lakers, and have the Clippers fall ahead of the Lakers and try and win that way out of the West. I don't know if that's where his mindset is. I think winning this championship changes a lot, and he seems to be happy there. I know he was kind of the same as DeRozan. DeRozan didn't want to leave Toronto, didn't want to go to San Antonio. Obviously, Kawhi did want to leave San Antonio, but didn't want to go to Toronto. He wanted to go to LA. Didn't end up that way, and he made, like I said with DeRozan before, he made the most of it, and even more so by carrying the Raptors to a title. And now that he's won there, and now that he's been there, he seems happier, I think, than he thought he was going to be originally. And winning a title for a city changes things, and especially when you're the guy. He's clearly the number one star in that team. He's the MVP of the finals again for a second time now after winning it with the Spurs. And when you throw that all into the mix, that could sway your opinion. He may feel that that's home for him now, especially being a champion again there and delivering in the first year. He may want to try and build on that again. I think I agree with you. I think he'll probably stay, but no shock if he goes to the Clippers, though.
Yeah, no shock. I agree with you there. Kyrie Irving looks like he's going to the Brooklyn Nets. Would you like that possible signing for them? I would, because I think he'd come in there and help that young core a little bit. Although D'Angelo Russell, that would be a tough piece to lose after his breakout season. What do you make of the possibility of Kyrie and Brooklyn?
Yeah, you hit on it. That's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, it's pretty tough. I wasn't that high on Russell coming out of Ohio State, and he did start slow with the Lakers, and he turned it on. I got to admit, he played much better than I thought he would, much faster than I thought he would in his career in the NBA last season. And the thing with the Nets is their chemistry was such a big factor for them last year. It's a lot of what made them surprised and made them better than a lot of people expected them to be. If you put a guy like Kyrie in there now, not to say that he isn't better than D'Angelo Russell, because he certainly is, but Russell's good, and Russell can develop and get better. He had built a great chemistry with some of the guys that are on the team, and a lot of them will be returning. And if you disrupt that and send Russell away now as a restricted free agent, maybe trade him away, and then you bring in a guy like Kyrie, who, let's face it, I mean, as great as he is as a talent, has had major chemistry issues, especially with the Celtics in Boston. If that type of thing happens with the Nets, that whole thing can fall apart, because, I mean, make them better talent-wise than what they have right now. But like I said, with that Nets team, I don't know that there's too many better teams in the NBA that chemistry-wise were as strong as the Nets were last year, and that would be my fear with going that route if I'm the Nets. So it's going to be interesting. It does seem like that's where he might be headed, but we'll see.
Yeah, it should be very interesting. I just got a thing on Twitter. Mark Stein retweeted somebody that covers the Celtics that Al Horford, instead of re-signing a 3-year deal with the Celtics like people thought, is looking to sign a 4-year deal elsewhere. What's next for the Celtics? They're going to lose Kyrie Irving. They could very well lose Al Horford. Do they trade, or at least try to trade Gordon Hayward? Try to get younger and build around Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum? What's next for that team?
That's a good question. I mean, there's so much going on with that team right now. Kyrie is going to be the first domino, I think, to fall. We have to see if he's coming back or not first, and then I think they go from there. But like you said, there's a lot going on. Hayward, the problem with him is he's still kind of recovering from that injury. He hasn't gotten back to what we saw before when they got him from Utah, what they thought he would be. That was obviously a gruesome injury that he suffered, and that takes some time. For him to even just play, even at the level he played at last year, was progress. But he's not what they need him to be. He's not yet close to what they thought they were getting when they first signed him. So it'd be tough to move him, because other teams obviously know that too, and they're still waiting for Hayward to be what Hayward thinks he can be, or what the Celtics originally thought Hayward could be. And if that's the case from other teams' point of view, well, it's going to be hard to move him. So if that's hard to move him, that's going to also affect other things that they're going to do in that team. And so it's really kind of that butterfly effect, not only throughout the league, but also in a microcosm of that with the Celtics right now. They got so many issues going on right now with Horford, with Hayward, with Kyrie. It's kind of interesting how that team has risen so fast and not fallen yet, but at least there's sort of some upheaval right now. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with them.
Yeah, I'm very fascinated to see what happens with the Boston Celtics. What's your sleeper team of the offseason?
I don't know. I think maybe it's interesting to see maybe what the Sixers are going to do because they've got some questions too with Tobias Harris and Jimmy Butler, and then Embiid's health is never something that can be counted on. So they've got some decisions and some moves that they might want to make, and that's a team that's kind of was moving in the right direction, was on the cusp of things, but then ran into Milwaukee in the playoffs. So I don't know if I'd call it a sleeper team, but it's maybe a team that isn't one of the teams that a lot of people are talking about as much as some of the others. That is going to be a team that it will be a team that you want to keep an eye on to see what they do, because obviously what they do is going to affect a lot of what happens around the league as well. If Butler goes somewhere, if Harris goes somewhere, depending on where they go, that's going to affect things, and then that's going to have the trickle-down effect with some other teams. So it's kind of one of the teams that, I wouldn't say it's an under-the-radar team or a sleeper team by any means, because obviously we know they're good, and we know they're one of the better teams in the East, but they're not one of the best teams in the league. They're kind of not at that level yet. So from that standpoint, you can kind of consider them somewhat of a sleeper team, and what they do is not only going to obviously have a big effect for them, but around the league.
Yeah, they're an interesting team for sure. How about out west? Teams like Denver and Portland and Utah, Oklahoma City. 4 teams are all playoff teams a year ago. Not much buzz about any of those teams, although I've heard a little bit about Utah being involved with D'Angelo Russell. Let's start with the Nuggets. What do you think they're up to?
I mean, the Nuggets and Blazers are kind of put in the same boat. Obviously, the Blazers did beat them in the playoffs last year, but they seem like the teams, one of those two, that, or maybe both, that are ready to take that next step. If the Warriors lose Clay, obviously he's not going to play next year anyway, but if they also couldn't sign him beyond next year, and we'll see with the injury because it's an ACL, but we expect him to be out, for a length of time, if not the entire season, kind of like with KP here in New York. And if they don't re-sign him, if that's the end of him with the Warriors, and if they should lose Durant after next year, after he rehabs, and then you're left with Steph and Dre as kind of the what was that foundation originally. The next teams look like Denver and Portland. Those are going to look like the teams that would kind of take that mantle. That seem to be the teams they're ready to overtake them. Houston's obviously got some issues because now Chris Paul wants out. So the Jazz also, look, they won 50 games last year. Good team. The D'Angelo Russell rumors are interesting, but obviously still have Rubio there, but we'll see what happens with him. Mitchell kind of took a little bit of a step back, so you kind of worry about him a little bit for Utah, but up to the talent's still there, and you can build around him. And Gobert, is obviously talent in the middle, good rim protector, and even guys like Ingles, good piece to have, a good shooter. So they're an interesting team, but I don't think they're not quite at the level of a Portland or a Denver yet. But those seem to be the two teams that are kind of ready to step forward if Golden State, if something's going to fall apart for them. So
yeah.
I would say those are teams to keep an eye on. Whether they make some moves or not, we'll see. But certainly Russell going to Utah could change things for Utah and kind of put them in that mix with Portland and Denver as well.
Yeah, I agree with that, although I do not think that D'Angelo goes to Utah. I think that a team that was a rumor for D'Angelo, and I really think that there's a chance he goes. I really like the fit for him with Victor Oladipo in Indiana. What do you make about that fit?
Yeah, it's certainly a good play. Another guy that, obviously has been hurt by injury. But I think, I'm not sure where he'll end up, but I think at the moment, he's going to be due to be healthy, I think, for next season. And then, Indiana is another one of those teams, they're not, you kind of talk about the different levels, like the Toronto's and Milwaukee's in the East, and then we talked about, Philadelphia being that next level down, but close. Indiana's, kind of that team that is also at that next level, kind of trying to move up. Had a good season last year, kind of unexpectedly, even with all the people hurt. But when he comes back, I think I don't see him going anywhere for a while. I think, if he's healthy, he's the cornerstone of that franchise and a player that the Pacers are gonna build around.
I agree with you about Oladipo. Another interesting team in my mind, I mentioned in that group with the Nuggets and the Blazers and the Jazz, is the Oklahoma City Thunder. They have Westbrook and George locked up long term. Steven Adams' name I've heard in trade talks, although I do not think that he will be moved. Do you think they have any interesting plans in store?
I haven't heard any rumors in terms of moves for them or trades or anything, but like you said, Russ is still there. Didn't work out with Melo, and for going back a while. But George obviously had a great season. A lot of people put him in almost MVP talk. I don't think he was quite there, but he did have a tremendous season. He's obviously a great two-way player. Adams anchor in the middle is great for them. And then, Schroeder was actually a good move. To have him, as a backup to Russ, I mean, that's a solid guy to have on the bench and have a good guy that is a young guy that plays a lot of energy, good motor, a lot, good vision, can score. So they've got some. It's another team that in a crowded West, I guess right now, right there with Utah, won 49 games last year. Utah won 50. Didn't get it done in the playoffs last year. I'm surprised they didn't give Portland a little more of a run, although when Damian Lillard's making 37-foot step-back threes to beat you, it's hard to overcome that. But, they should have played better in that series, but I think that's the question for them is they seem to be a good regular season team, especially with Russ putting up his numbers. But can they get it done in the playoffs? That's kind of the question for them right now. I'm not sure that they're built to go on an extended run in the postseason right now, the way they're built. With George and Westbrook, you're always going to compete, but I think they need to do something, maybe to fill up that bench a little more of a side Schroeder, and give a little bit of help with him in that second unit to make them a little bit stronger to make a deeper run in the postseason.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see what the Thunder do. This is probably one of the craziest off seasons that I can remember. And one last thing for you. An off-season bold prediction. I just had Ryan Berger on about a half hour ago. Mine for him was that the Celtics would trade the number 14 pick to the Memphis Grizzlies for Mike Conley. And Boston would obviously be giving up more in that scenario as well. But here's another one for you. I kind of threw it at Ryan Berger too, but I'm going to call it to you. I think Al Horford leaves the Celtics and goes back to the Atlanta Hawks.
Wouldn't surprise me. I mean, they're kind of building something there, slowly. They're acquiring assets, and we'll see what they get. If they don't move the 8th and 10th pick, we'll see what they get out of that, and maybe they add a couple more pieces that are pretty nice that could help. Obviously, he played there. He liked it there, I believe, but wanted to come to what he thought would be a contender. And he was a good leader on the Celtics team, but I think as a guy like that, who is a good leader, who tries to lead, but doesn't see it happening, and the chemistry starts to dissipate and fall apart, and when you count on another guy who's supposed to be a leader, like in a star, like a guy like Kyrie, not really leading as much as you expect, at least that's from the outside looking in, that's what it seems like. That's got to be frustrating for Horford. So I think he might be ready to go. I'm not sure if he really controls the situation there, if he's going to ask out, and I'm sure Danny Ainge is going to try and do everything he can to keep Horford because he's been good for them. But, if the right deal comes along and if Atlanta can offer the Celtics something good that they want, that could be a move that could be made. You know, the Celtics obviously now they're struggling now with some situations, with especially chemistry wise, and possibly losing Kyrie to free agency and some other things, and not competing as well against Milwaukee in the playoffs as they would have liked last year. But obviously getting to that point though was through assets, through draft picks, acquiring draft picks. Same what kind of the Knicks are doing right now. They have all these first round picks that they're acquiring, and they're trying to build slowly, trying to do it the right way. It seems finally for the first time in a while. But the Celtics did that too. They hit rock bottom, and then they just kind of slowly built. Collecting assets. Collecting trades. Through trades, collecting draft picks, and then using those draft picks to turn those around and build a team. And if they feel that this is not going to work out, and if they especially feel they're going to lose Kyrie and need to kind of move in a different direction, they may look at the 8th and 10th pick from Atlanta. Obviously it's not a deep draft. It doesn't seem like the top 10, but it is still 2 top 10 picks. And maybe they could do something with those, either moving them for something else, or if Ainge believes he gets something that can help them through the draft, that might be attractive in a package for Horford, depending on what else Atlanta might offer him. So if that's something that they might be interested in, I could probably see Horford doing that.
Yeah, but Horford's a free agent, so it would probably be like a sign and trade kind of a situation where the Hawks have to make the picks for the players. And then you move those 2 players in a sign and trade. And we haven't seen a sign and trade in a while in the NBA, as far as I'm concerned. What's your bold prediction for this offseason?
The offseason, I don't know. Not sure there's gonna be any big moves, but I gotta think that somebody, like we were talking before, somebody's gonna surprise that we don't expect. I'm not going to say it's going to be Giannis or Kawhi, at 15, something like that. But like we said, like a Hachimura, a PJ Washington, maybe even somebody in the second round, maybe a Carson Edwards or somebody like that might really surprise and say, might be taking high second round, and might surprise. He's a guy that could really shoot the ball from deep. We saw what he did in the tournament last year. He's a guy that I think. I'm not going to say he's going to be a superstar, but I think there's going to be somebody, at least 2 or 3 or 4 pieces, maybe mid-late first round, maybe early second round, somebody like the names I mentioned that maybe might surprise some people and say, wow, we didn't really see that coming. Because it happens all the time, maybe like a Grant Williams or somebody like that, in the second round, solid player at Tennessee, somebody that you don't really expect. We see it all the time. We always try and predict and say, well, this guy's going to be great. He's going to go 3, 4, 5, whatever. And, and it doesn't quite pan out sometimes. And then there's always that guy at, mid-late first round or something like that maybe not late first round, but mid-first round, later on in the first round at least. And maybe even a second round pick too. We obviously, we've seen it with the Warriors, with Draymond Green at 35. So there's always a guy that you kind of overlook, teams overlook, and Jokic is another example, 41 with the Nuggets, right? So there's always those guys. I think I don't know if that's bold because we kind of gotten accustomed to expecting it now at this point because it always happens. But I would say those are some names to kind of keep an eye on. Maybe like a Carson Edwards, somebody like that, Grant Williams, maybe a Hachimura, somebody that you're not kind of honed in on right now that. You look back later and say, oh, man, it's too bad, that Team X didn't pick him because look how he panned out.
Yeah, that does normally happen every year. So it was nice to have you on, and I will ask you to come on again after the offseason, and we'll go over all the moves.
All right, great. Looking forward to it. I'm sure there's going to be a lot to talk about.